If you've watched Larson Farms for any amount of time, chances are you remember Brody. He wasn't the loudest voice or the main face of the channel, but he was always there. Working long hours, handling massive equipment, and quietly becoming a familiar part of the farm's daily grind. Then, without warning, viewers started noticing something strange. Brody wasn't showing up anymore. At first, people brushed it off. A few missed videos didn't mean much, but as weeks turned into months, the questions started piling up. Did he leave the farm? Was there a fallout behind the scenes? Or did something more serious happen that no one was talking about? Rumors began circulating in comment sections and fan discussions, each theory more intense than the last. And the silence from the channel only made the mystery grow. But once you dig deeper, the story surrounding Brody Barr isn't as simple or as dramatic and more as many people assumed. For a lot of viewers, Brody was never introduced as a main character on Larson Farms. And that's exactly why his absence felt so strange. He didn't need an on-screen title or long explanations, he was just there. In the background of long harvest days, climbing in and out of machinery, doing the kind of work that made the farm run smoothly without drawing attention to itself. Over time, that consistency made him familiar. And familiarity is what makes people notice when something changes. As the channel grew, fans started recognizing patterns. Certain people showed up regularly, certain roles stayed the same. So when Brody Barr began appearing less often, it stood out, even if no one could quite explain why. At first, it was easy to ignore. Farming is seasonal, people take breaks, schedules shift. But then the gaps got longer. Comment sections slowly changed tone. Instead of talking about equipment or crop yields, viewers started asking questions. Anyone know where Brody's been? Did he leave the farm? Did I miss something? None of these questions came with answers, and that silence became part of the story. And when a channel uploads regularly but avoids addressing an obvious change, viewers start filling in the blanks themselves. Some assumed it was nothing, others weren't so sure, because on YouTube, when someone disappears without explanation, it rarely feels random. It feels intentional. That's when speculation began creeping in. Quietly at first, then louder. And while most of it was just guesswork, one thing was clear, George's talking. Brody's absence wasn't just noticed, it became a mystery. But what fans thought happened, and what may have actually been going on behind the scenes, weren't necessarily the same thing. What made Brody different wasn't that he was constantly talking to the camera, it was the opposite. On a channel like Larson Farms, where the work itself is the star, Brody blended in perfectly. He showed up, got to work, and handled whatever needed to be done without turning it into a performance. And oddly enough, that's what made people trust him. Viewers could tell he wasn't there for attention. He wasn't forcing jokes or explaining every move. He was just another set of hands keeping the operation running, whether that meant long days in the field or jumping between machines without much fanfare. Over time, that quiet consistency became part of the channel's rhythm. When Brody was on screen, things felt normal, productive, familiar. That's why his presence carried more weight than people realized at the time. On YouTube, audiences pick up on patterns fast. They notice who shows up when things get tough, who's there during the long harvest stretches, and who seems genuinely invested in the grind. Brody Barr checked all those boxes. So when he stopped appearing as often, it didn't feel like just another employee being off camera. It felt like a piece of the routine was missing. And routines matter, especially on channels built around real life. Farming content thrives on continuity, and Brody had quietly become part of that continuity. That's when viewers started rewatching older videos and noticing just how often he'd been there before. It wasn't nostalgia, it was comparison. The contrast between then and now was impossible to ignore. And once people realized how much he'd been part of the background story, the questions became unavoidable. Because when someone who never chased attention suddenly disappears, it makes people wonder if there's more going on than they were ever shown. And that curiosity, that's what opened the door for rumors to start spreading. The turning point didn't come from a single video. There was no announcement, no goodbye, no explanation tucked into a vlog. Instead, it was the slow realization that something felt off. Brody wasn't gone overnight, he just stopped being there as often. And on a channel built around routine, that kind of change doesn't go unnoticed for long. At first, most viewers gave it the benefit of the doubt. Farming schedules aren't predictable, weather changes plans, people rotate jobs. Missing a few uploads didn't mean anything by itself. But when newer videos kept rolling out and Brody still wasn't showing up, the pattern became harder to ignore. Fans started scanning backgrounds, listening for voices, waiting for even a quick appearance. It never came. That's when the comment section shifted. Questions popped up more frequently, and not just from one or two people. Entire threads were built around the same idea. Did Brody leave? Is he still part of the farm? Did something happen behind the scenes? None of these questions were answered directly, which only made them louder. Without official clarification, speculation filled the gap. Some viewers assumed it was a quiet exit. Maybe he moved on to something else. Others wondered if there had been tension or a disagreement. A few jumped to darker conclusions, simply because silence online often feels suspicious, even when it isn't. And the longer the silence lasted, the more those rumors spread. Not because people wanted drama, but because they wanted closure. Brody Barr had become familiar enough that his absence felt personal to longtime viewers. But what most people didn't realize yet was that the real explanation, while less dramatic than some theories, was far more human than anyone expected. And once a small detail surfaced, the conversation shifted in a completely different direction. Once people accepted that Brody wasn't just on a break, the theories started multiplying fast. And to be clear, none of these were confirmed. They were rumors born from silence, stitched together by comment sections and fan discussions. But on YouTube, speculation spreads quicker than facts ever do. One of the first rumors was that Brody had quietly quit. Some viewers believed he may have decided farm life wasn't for him anymore, or that a better opportunity came along off camera. Others took it a step further, suggesting there may have been tension behind the scenes. No proof, no screenshots, just assumptions fueled by the fact that no one had addressed his absence directly. Then came the heavier theories. A few fans wondered if something serious had happened health-wise, especially since farming content can be physically demanding. Others speculated about personal struggles, reading far too deeply into old clips and facial expressions. Again, none of this was backed by any official statement. But once those ideas are planted, they don't disappear easily. What made the rumors feel more believable to some people was the total lack of clarification. The channel continued uploading like normal. The work went on. But Brody wasn't mentioned, and in online spaces, silence often gets mistaken for confirmation, even when it shouldn't. Threads popped up comparing timestamps, counting appearances, and analyzing when he was last seen. The narrative slowly shifted from "where's Brody" to "something must have happened." That shift is important, because it shows how quickly curiosity can turn into suspicion. And right when speculation was reaching its peak, a small detail surfaced that changed the tone of the conversation completely. Not a full explanation, just enough to point in a different direction. And once that detail came out, many of the wildest rumors suddenly didn't make as much sense anymore. Amid all the guessing and theories, one rumor stood out. Not because it was dramatic, but because it came from a very different place. Instead of speculation in YouTube comments, this detail surfaced through farm-related community posts and was shared quietly, without hype. According to those posts, Brody had been dealing with a serious health issue and was later described as being cancer-free. Now, it's important to say this clearly. There was never a full public breakdown, no detailed explanation, and no official video addressing it directly. That lack of detail is exactly why the information didn't spread fast at first. But once viewers connected the dots, the tone of the conversation shifted almost overnight. Suddenly, the theories about drama or fallout didn't make much sense. Farming is physically demanding, and stepping away for health reasons isn't unusual. It's just not something creators always feel comfortable sharing publicly. For many fans, this explanation felt grounded, human, real. Still, because the information came in fragments, questions remained. How serious was it? How long had it been going on? Was it the reason he disappeared so quietly? Without answers, people filled in gaps the best they could. But this time, the speculation leaned more toward concern than suspicion. What stood out most was how quickly fans changed their tone. Comment sections that once felt accusatory became supportive. Messages wishing Brody well started replacing rumors entirely. Even without confirmation, people seem to understand that some things don't need to be content. And in a space where creators often feel pressured to explain every absence, the silence suddenly felt intentional. Not secretive, but protective. Brody Barr wasn't vanishing for drama. He may have simply been dealing with something far bigger than YouTube. But even with that shift in understanding, one question still lingered. If that was the reason, why didn't the channel ever say more? And that question leads to the final piece of the story. Once the health-related rumor surfaced, a new question replaced all the others. If this was really about something personal and serious, why didn't the channel just say that? Why let speculation spiral for so long instead of addressing it head-on? The answer may come down to how Larson Farms has always handled its content. The channel was never built around personal drama or detailed life updates. It focused on work, crops, equipment, the day-to-day reality of farming. Personal matters stayed off camera, and that consistency mattered. Breaking that pattern to explain someone else's health situation might have crossed a line they weren't comfortable crossing. There's also the reality that not every absence needs an explanation. From the outside, viewers feel invested, and they are. But that doesn't automatically mean access to someone's private life. If Brody was dealing with something serious, choosing not to turn it into content may have been an act of respect, not avoidance. Silence can feel suspicious online, but it can also be protective. And once fans started realizing that possibility, the narrative shifted again. Instead of demanding answers, people started respecting the boundary. They understood that the lack of details didn't mean something shady happened. It just meant some things weren't meant to be public. Another possibility is that Brody himself preferred it that way. Not everyone wants updates shared with hundreds of thousands of viewers, especially during something personal. And if that was the case, staying quiet wasn't just a channel decision, it was a human one. In the end, Brody Barr fading out of the spotlight may not have been about mystery at all. It may have been about choosing real life over online explanations. And when you look at it that way, the silence stops feeling strange and starts making sense. But that still leaves one final question. What does his story say about the way we view people on YouTube? By the time the rumors cooled down, something interesting had happened. The conversation stopped being about where Brody went and started being about why viewers felt entitled to an answer in the first place. That shift says a lot about how modern YouTube works. When someone appears regularly on a channel, audiences naturally form a connection. Even if that person never speaks much, never explains their life, and never asks for attention, familiarity creates attachment. Viewers start to feel like they know them. And when that person disappears, the reaction isn't logical, it's emotional. That's exactly what happened here. Brody Barr wasn't a character in a scripted show, but people treated his absence like a missing plot line. They wanted closure, an explanation, something to wrap it up neatly. But real life doesn't work that way, especially for people who never signed up to be public figures in the first place. This situation also highlights a bigger truth about channels like Larson Farms. Not everyone on screen is a content creator. Some are just doing their jobs, temporarily stepping into the spotlight without realizing how much visibility comes with it. When they step back out, the internet doesn't always know how to let go. In the end, Brody's story wasn't about drama, controversy, or some hidden secret. It was about how easily normal people quietly become part of online narratives they never asked for, and how quickly curiosity can turn into assumptions when there's no clear boundary between content and real life. Ironically, the lack of explanation may be the most honest ending possible. No clickbait reveal, no emotional update, just someone choosing privacy over attention. And maybe that's the part of the story worth remembering most. When you strip away the rumors, the comment theories, and the speculation that naturally builds online, the answer to what happened to Brody is surprisingly simple. And that's exactly why it felt unsatisfying to so many people. There was no dramatic fallout, no exposed secret, no hidden controversy waiting to be uncovered. Just a real person dealing with real life, mostly off camera. From everything that's publicly known, Brody Barr didn't disappear because of drama. He didn't vanish because of a feud. And he wasn't quietly erased from the channel. The most reasonable explanation is that his priorities shifted, likely influenced by personal and health-related factors, and the channel chose not to turn that into content. For viewers, that can feel anticlimactic. The internet trains us to expect big reveals and emotional explanations. But farming and life doesn't work on upload schedules. Sometimes people step back, sometimes they don't announce it, and sometimes the healthiest choice is staying private, even when thousands of people are curious. What makes Brody's story linger isn't mystery, it's relatability. Anyone can imagine being in his position, suddenly recognized by strangers, talked about online, and expected to explain decisions that were never meant for public consumption. Choosing silence in that situation isn't weakness, it's boundaries. And in a strange way, the lack of a clear ending is the ending. Brody was part of the story for a season, and then life moved forward. No cliffhanger, no comeback tease, just quiet closure. So if you're still wondering what really happened to Brody, the answer might be this: nothing scandalous at all. Just a normal person stepping out of the spotlight while the internet learned how hard it is to let go.